Hi guys, thanks for being here. It is so nice to be in a feminist bookstore. I've done some of the, the Barnes and Nobles and the Border stuff. But actually my next book is going to be about the connections between the movements, because compassion isn't species specific, and it all fits together. So it's so nice to be invited here today. Wanted to just get a feel for who's here. How many of you guys were at the Vegan Times thing last night? I see some faces. All right, so you'll see a few slides over my faves, I feel badly because there's like 200 images and I've got like 30 up here and a few of them are the same, but they're my favorites. And did some of you guys come because you heard me on Stu's show, or anybody come as a result of Air America? 1, 2, and 3, and okay, just getting a feel. And how many people here are already are seriously involved in animal rights, and how many people are just sort of curious? So let's go with the seriously involved in animal rights gang first. It's a nice mixture, and then we've got the curious, just kind of wondering what it's about. Beautiful, good to know. Thank you. Whatever you say, you're going to offend somebody, so I just like to know who I'm going to be offending at what time. Okay, well, what I'm doing today, I started doing PowerPoints rather than just doing readings, because the book, I don't know how many of you have seen it yet, but it's very graphic intensive. It's in full color, and if you haven't seen inside it yet, it looks like that. And it's packed with cartoons and celebrity photos and quotes. The idea was that it came to me to write it. I had not planned on writing an animal rights book, and the reason for that is I was working in our movement. We already had such great books on the issues. There was Animal Liberation, there was Tom Reagan stuff, there was Dominion, and I had no interest in just reinventing the wheel. But then a friend went to work at a book company, and he was heading up the division that they said was aimed at the 18 to 35 celebrity-driven market. And when I heard he was going there, I'm like, well, I'm never going to write anything for him. And one morning I just woke up and it was like, our movement doesn't have a book for the 18 to 35 celebrity-driven market, for the college market, and for people who are into pop culture. And I just sort of dreamt up the idea of having an animal rights book that was in some ways fun. Now, some of this information is not fun at all, but I thought, at least between the tears, you can have a laugh, and I think of movies like Life is Beautiful, where you're laughing out loud one moment and crying the next. And it can be good to look at, and I wanted to make it so that it would be a perfect gift book, because I know people who are passionate about this stuff always want to introduce other people to it. And it's nice if you have something which looks like a gift rather than an assignment when you're giving it for Christmas or something. So that's what went into the making of this. And then when I started doing PowerPoints, I just really enjoyed being able to share. I hated it when I was reading from the page and I was seeing this fabulous cartoon and you were just seeing me, and I wanted to be holding it up, and that didn't work. So we are going with the PowerPoint today. What I'm going to do is going to sort of take you through the book and read sections from it as I go. I think I'm going to read about 4 little sections. The book's broken up into, I think it's 70 something, and the reason I know that is, remember 1 October I had 4 months to finish the book by deadline, and I counted the sections and decided to do 1 a day. So there's 70 something sections. I'm going to read just 3 or 4 of them, and I'm going to sort of show you the chapters and some of the cartoons and on that note. And so yeah, I'm going to take you through the book. I'm going to read 4 or 5 sections. I think it's going to take maybe 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, we'll see. And then I hope you'll have questions and we'll have a chat and share thoughts and whatever. So, book cover with nice endorsements from, I'm so proud to have my Gloria Steinem endorsement when I'm reading at this bookstore. And I wore this t-shirt, which actually the second I got it, I called Gloria and I said, you wouldn't believe the t-shirt I just got, because she's my mentor very much. Her husband was actually a major animal rights activist, so that's why she's so familiar with the connection. He was a feminist and an animal rights activist. She was already vegetarian, but when she married David, she became pretty committed to the cause. yours too. They sort of really fed each other that stuff. And I have up there my Chosen by the Washington Post as one of the best books of 2008 because I'm so proud of it. But also a good thing to know if you want to give it to somebody. It's not just you giving them your passion, but actually the Washington Post says it's good. So first chapter, and I am going to read from this because this is the introduction to the book, and it probably says some of the things I've just told you. But the book is very much, that's why I asked, who here is already committed to the cause. The book is definitely aimed at people who are not. What I hope people will take out of the book is just that they won't think that their vegan friends and family are crazy anymore once they've read it. Some people change their ways, some people don't. And so it's aimed to be read by people who aren't already committed. But the nice thing is that activists, when they read it, they tell me they love it because it tells them how to answer questions about these issues in ways that they might not have thought of. And also I've been in the movement for 10 years, so it's pretty packed with information. So even if you're involved, there's probably something you don't know. I certainly learned things when I was writing it. So we're going to go with the opening. First chapter is called Welcome to the World of Animal Rights. Welcome to the world of animal rights. When I tell people I work full-time as an animal rights activist, many of them have questions. Am I vegan? If so, why? Aren't California's happy cows really happy? Do activists who target medical research like mice more than men? And who belongs in the zoo? Are the animals there good ambassadors for their species? After spending 8 years fully immersed in animal rights issues, monitoring the media for dawnwatch.com, I decided I was ready to tackle those questions and wanted to do so in as friendly and fun a manner as possible. And so we have this book. In it, I hope to dispel the myth that animal rights activism is radical and unreasonable. In fact, as you read of the cruelty we offer animals as thanks for what we take from them, you may see radical departures from your own standards of reasonable decency. Animal rights versus human rights. Let's start by addressing some common questions animal rights activists get asked. Why worry about animal rights when there's so much human suffering in the world? Animal rights activists are asked that constantly, and you wonder why we tend to be feisty. Why don't people ask human rights activists how they can do their work when there's so much animal suffering in the world? Seriously though, part of the answer is in the question. Even somebody who does nothing to end human hunger wouldn't justify his apathy by telling relief workers that there are just more important things to worry about. That's because society as a whole acknowledges that human suffering matters. Animal suffering, however, is treated as trivial, even as billions of beings endure unimaginable institutionalized cruelty. To those touched by the suffering of animals, the injustice of the suggestion that animals just don't matter is a call to action. The question, moreover, is based on a faulty premise. It suggests that compassion is like a pie we must divide into parts, and if we offer big pieces to some, others will get left with slivers. But compassion is not some sort of finite substance that might run out. It's more like a habit we get better at as we practice. And the animals are a good place to start exercising it, for their sake and for ours. George Angell, the founder of the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, put it well when asked why he focused on kindness to animals when there's so much cruelty to people in the world. He said, I'm working at the roots. Before I extended my own efforts towards animals, I worked every Sunday for 6 years in a soup kitchen for New York's homeless people. I worked alongside many fellow vegetarians. And when I saw the film Amazing Grace, I was not surprised to learn that William Wilberforce, who led the parliamentary campaign against the British slave trade, was also one of the founders of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. That's because compassion and cruelty are not species-specific. Most of us have heard that serial killers usually start by killing animals. The same compulsion drives the killer's behavior when they move on to humans. The urge to hurt just becomes so strong that it outweighs societal norms and fears of legal retribution. So it is with less active cruelty, with the closing of our hearts that has us sit by as others suffer. The compassion shutdown switch that allows us to chew pieces of veal while blocking out thoughts of baby calves alone in crates is the same switch It guides us to change TV channels away from news of children starving in Darfur. We don't want the image to hamper the taste of the meat or our enjoyment of the wine we are drinking, a bottle of which costs more than it costs to feed a child in Darfur for a month. When we disengage that switch, when we get out of the habit of closing our hearts, the world will be better for the calves and the kids. So that's the opening. I'm actually going to put my sweater back on. I'm used to California weather, or as in his article, I was thinking some of you are probably here also because of Bill Leader's article in the Isthmus. And he quoted me as, I'm California, I'm bi-coastal baby. I live more in LA, but I go to New York often. And in New York, we sometimes have weather like this, but everything is so overheated that you walk in and you strip off your layers and you're running around in your tank tops. And at least I got to show off my non-well-behaved woman t-shirt. Now I'm back into a jacket. The first chapter, the other chapters sort of go through the different ways in which society uses animals and some of the surprising ways we abuse animals that a lot of us never knew about until we started looking into it. But the first chapter deals more with the theory, the explanations for why we get involved in the things that we do, the questions we get asked. So we've got the bit I just read. The book is full of Bizarro cartoons. There's about 40 Bizarro cartoons. And here we have the combination between the movements, the merging of the movements. We have the donkey saying to the man, I do all the heavy lifting and you have the audacity to call this fair trade coffee. And what exactly do we mean by animal rights is something we get asked, and I talk about in the book, my definition of it. But here we have Mrs. Bear saying, I'd like to hear less talk about animal rights and more talk about animal responsibilities, as Mr. Bear is sitting there watching the TV. We talk about speciesism and the way, whether we've evolved from the animals and what we share. And I just had to share this lovely little cartoon where we've got the amoeba, and then we've got the fish, and then we've got some sort of salamander, and somebody's in a tree, and then we've got the ape, and then we've got the caveman, and then we've got the executive, and then we've got the old guy cleaning up the dog poop at the end of the day. So that's my life. And we talk about the ways animals differ from us and things they do better than us, like much better sense of smell. So here they all are saying hello to each other with their little name tags on their little butts. These are the last two are by Dan Reynolds. I just fell in love with his cartoons and got permission to use them. Some of the cartoonists gave me permission to use already published work, and some people did work especially for the book. It was a mixture. But Reynolds' stuff was out there, and I was like, oh my God, I have to use this. Anthony Frieda is an artist who's a friend of mine. I own this. I own the original for this, and I knew I had to put it in the book. And I was telling people last night, Anthony was actually the first person I called when I dreamt up the idea of the book. I'm like, Anthony, I want you to do the cover, which didn't happen because HarperCollins had their own ideas, but I knew I wanted his art all through the book. So on the first chapter is about pets, companion animals. I was always taught to... So I was talking about, that I was always taught to say companion animals because pets is demeaning. And then I started to think about it some more, and I thought, my dogs are pets. They're beloved little guys who I look after, and as I say in the book, when they start driving themselves to the vet, then I'll think about not looking down on them in any way. But they're a lot more like kids to me than companions, so I call them pets. And I apologize to people who were offended by that in the book. And the opening joke is that Wayne Purcell at a conference said that some people in the movement think we need to stop calling them pets, we need to start calling them canine Americans. And of course, some spies were whenever we have conferences, the antis come so they can report back what those horrible anti-animal rights activists are up to. And they actually reported that, suggesting that Wayne was serious. So, all right, so we have a section on talking about having pets as companion animals and the reasons for, the reasons against, why I'm quite happy to have mine, certainly talking about the need to rescue, and we'll go into that a little bit. And so in the section, should we have pets at all, we talk about, what's actually good for the animal. And another person who donated a lot of work to this book was Patrick McDonald, who does the cartoon Mutts that I know everybody is familiar with. And this is trying to remember what Chain Dog's name is. But it's one of Patrick's favorite characters, and he says, "What's on my list today? Stay chained up in the backyard." Sigh, I wish I could cross that one off. Is it Spike? I don't know. We can Google it later. I was once at a reading, and I asked something like that. Next thing, somebody had their answer on their BlackBerry. So that's something I talk about when we do take animals into our home. Are we just doing it so that they can amuse us, or are we actually giving them a life worth living? Puppy mills, I think most of you probably know what they are by now. We are finally starting to get the word out. Oprah did a special on them. And this is what they look like. This is where most of the animals you buy off the internet and in pet stores were raised. Their mothers live in little cages like this, and I talk about that. One of the things that when I put the book together and I said I wanted it to be more like a gift than an assignment is one thing I knew is that I had to have some animal cruelty photos. But what I definitely wanted to do is any animal cruelty photo had to be accompanied by a gorgeous actress or celebrity or rock star. So thank you, Charlize, for having said something about puppy mills. And we've got this quote from her: "Almost all of the puppies for sale at your local mall were churned out by breeding facilities called puppy mills. The conditions common to most mills are so inhumane, the dogs are left in various states of physical and mental anguish. As long as there's a market for their babies, dogs will continue to be bred, neglected, and killed at puppy mills. If you adopt an animal from the shelter, you not only save her life, you'll also end the suffering of countless dogs at puppy mills." So when you buy from a pet store, what you're doing to that little baby's mother is something that when you think about it, you might want to do it differently. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just get people to think it through. Some people still want to happily go buy the pet at the pet store, but I just want people to think about it. Oh, and then Van Perara's humor again. We're talking about spay-neuter and the parrots asking the dog, "So what have they clipped to keep you hanging around this dump?" And I talk about birds, and in a section called "Robin Redbreast in a Cage Puts All Heaven in a Rage," which is a line from... was that you? No, it wasn't done. And then we've got Bizarre saying it more humorously, which is we've got the man in the cage, and St. Peter is saying to him, "You were originally scheduled for hell, but then this idea was suggested by one of your former parakeets, Petey." So, and we talk about just how we can enjoy animals just either in the wild as they were meant to be. There are animal rights activists who think the only thing to do with animals is just to leave them alone. They want nothing to do with us. I don't necessarily think that's true, and I think Mark Bittner proves that. He befriended a bunch of parrots in San Francisco, and there's a beautiful film about that, and I think he's happy and the parrots are happy. So I do think we can coexist with the other species without putting them in little cages and deciding that they are ours to do what we want with. And some of you saw this last night, the perfect example of the way we coexist with other species there. Lots of, the dog's doing his thing all day long. He's sniffing butts, he's licking his balls, he's munching out of garbage bins, he's drinking out of the toilet, but he's always got big kisses for us at the end of the day. So that was a brief run through the first chapter on companion animals. Then we go into animal entertainment. And Paul McCartney, actually this one came from the Getty image. This is a Getty image, but Sir Paul also gave us one, a photo to use later on in the book. And I talk about circuses and I talk about zoos. And again, this is something, the word I think is just starting to get out to the general community. But when I was growing up, I think I was worried when I saw bears on tight ropes. You know, I was extremely worried about the bear, and I didn't enjoy that sort of thing, but I never knew what went on behind the circuses. But we go into that in the book, and I showed this last night too. This is Anthony Frida's work. So the book has some cartoons, it's got some cool art. Anthony's done a lot of stuff for the Village Voice and the New Yorker, and I just wanted to include him. And this is down here, says "The meek shall inherit nothing." That's the caption on that picture. And with that, we've got a sad photo, but we've got kind of happy story I'm going to share with you. This is a lot of people's favorite, so I knew I had to read it today. And I talk in the book about zoos and about circuses and what the animals go through and the training and the bull hooks and the, you know, the elephants were trained by positive reinforcement, then you'd see the trainers in the middle, trainers in a tent with a bag of treats. When you see the trainer carrying a bull hook, you see them carrying a whip. You know that that animal knows what a whip feels like and knows what a bull hook feels like, and that's why the trainer's carrying it in the middle of the ring. So I'm going to tell you the story called Urban Elephant. Occasionally there are happy endings. Can you all hear me at the back now? I'm projecting enough? Okay. Occasionally there are happy endings for the animals used in circuses and zoos. Alison Argo's Emmy Award-winning PBS documentary, The Urban Elephant, tells the story of Shirley, who arrived as a baby from Asia and spent 30 years in the circus, till a leg injury ended her career. Unlike a professional human athlete or performer, she didn't get a cushy job in a broadcasting booth. As thanks for her years spent entertaining children, she was retired to the Louisiana Purchase Zoo. There she lived for 22 years in a concrete stall with a small grass yard, never seeing another of her own kind. Female elephants desperately need the companionship of other elephants, but that was barely known when Shirley arrived at the zoo. In 2003, however, the people running the Louisiana Purchase Zoo decided they could no longer give Shirley a home and agreed to send her to what the documentary calls a little piece of heaven carved out of the rolling hills of Tennessee. Carol Buckley's Elephant Sanctuary provides hundreds of acres on which retired elephants wander, free to come and go from the heated barn. Solomon James was Shirley's keeper at the zoo for 22 years. He clearly loves her. In the film, he says he spends as much time as he can with her so that she doesn't feel all alone. And we see him bathing her and talking to her with great affection. We watch as he accompanies her to her new home in Tennessee. Then with tears in his eyes, he says to the camera, "I'm going to miss her. But when I saw this place, I told her that there will be no more chains. She's free now. I don't know who was the first to put a chain on her, but I'm glad to know I was the last to take it off. She is free at last." Then he says, "I'm going to miss you, Shirley, my big girl." The elephants at the sanctuary come into the barn one by one to greet the new arrival, who is at first in a separate pen. They touch trunks through the bars. It looks like kissing. When an elephant named Jenny arrives, there's an uproar. Carol says she's never heard anything like it. The trumpeting goes on through the night. When Carol comes into the barn the next morning, she finds that in their desperation to get close to each other, Jenny and Shirley have bent the steel bars between them. Carol did some research into their backgrounds, and she found that 30 years earlier they had worked together in the same circus. Jenny was just a baby, and Shirley would have been like a surrogate mother. At the sanctuary, they became inseparable. We see them walking, resting, and bathing together. The documentary's final shot is of them standing in the middle of a sunlit field, looking together at their new home, with their bodies pressed against each other. They have woven their trunks together. They have woven their trunks through each other's front legs, as if they are attempting to bind themselves together. That's Shirley and Jenny's story, and we have a little photo of Shirley and Jenny from the Louisiana Purchase Zoo, 22 years alone in a pen. That's Shirley, and that's her with Jenny there. And they lived happily ever after, at least for a good many years. Next chapter is fashion victims, clothing, and Jeffrey Fisher, who's just starting to get published. I think I was the first person to publish his work in this book, and now he got some confidence. He's getting out there, did this lovely piece, and that's I think it's Skin and Bones in French. And then we've got more Dan Ferraro here. This is Dan's comment on fur, which is the devils talking to this woman down here, and layers of fur coats. And the devil's saying to her, they say you can't take it with you, but me and the animals decided to let you keep your fur coats. So there she is down in hell, wearing layers and layers and layers of them. I had said that we never get a graphic, horrible photo in this book without a gorgeous celebrity. Sometimes we really do the juxtaposition. And there we have Persia White from Girlfriends, and also the band XCO3. And if you can't read, I'm sure you can see that graphic, the skinned animal, and the caption is, "Here's the rest of your fur coat." And I talk about fur and the way those animals are treated, and just for colors. And then on a happier note, we've got Prince, and here he is at the Genesis Awards, which I was telling people about last night, which is like an animal-friendly Oscars, which happens in Hollywood, where movie stars give awards to major media who've done good animal-friendly work. And Prince got a Genesis Award for his media was one of his album covers. In the liner notes, he goes into what sheep go through for wool. I talked a little bit about that. I was surprised Stu Leviton brought that up this morning on the radio. But people think that wool is just, oh, you shear the sheep and he's fine. And, you know, if you had a sheep in your backyard, that might be the case, and you'd take him in after he was sheared. But unfortunately, sheep's coats are the thickest and most lucrative in midwinter. So in Australia, they'll be sheared in midwinter and then freezing for the rest of the winter, or immediately after that. Some of them die. But, you know, if you lose 1 in 100 or something, the amount of wool you got off the ones who you sheared early makes up for the loss. So, and that's just one of the many issues that we have with sheep. Live export, there's all sorts of issues. And people are surprised to learn this. When they hear that animal rights people don't wear wool, it sounds really nutty. And then you learn what goes on with the sheep, and you think, this is crazy. Because how much would it take to do it differently? You know, it's just, but whenever animals become objects of commerce, we get this horrible cruelty. So, this might be the second funnest chapter in the book, which is food, and I'm kidding, of course. Nobody wants to learn about these things. We try and present it in as palatable a manner as possible. This is Anthony Frieda's work again. He did the dogs having fun that I showed you earlier. And he's got this guy cut into bits of rib roast and ground meat and a shortcut on his shoulder. And again, we have the animal suffering and gorgeous Chris Waller from Death Cab for Cutie. So just listening to the new song, we've got the sows in the gestation crates up there, which is how breeding sows, the vast majority of them are kept in America, in a crate so small that they cannot turn around, they cannot lie down with their legs outstretched. And that is how these intelligent animals spend the majority of their lives. And as Chris says, factory farming is just disgusting. All you have to do is look at a couple of photos, and it's not hard to figure that out, which is why we include photos. And we've got cute Chris giving people an idea of what's going on. Bruce Greenwood, who I mentioned before as being, he'll kill me, as being blind and a bat, needing to go perch on a 6-foot thing to, Bruce is, I think a lot of you know him from various movies, and he's actually Captain Pike in the new Star Trek. So now when you go see Star Trek, you'll know that you've got a brand new committed animal activist playing Captain Pike. The new Star Trek goes backwards, so Kirk is young, and Bruce is the, and he's talking there about the beaches and how they used to be absolutely full of animals and clams, and we are just killing the oceans. They say, not animal rights activists, but the Science Journal said that by 2048, most of the major fisheries, you know, because they think of it as the stuff to eat, will have collapsed. We will have just killed off the oceans. Of course, when the fish die, the dolphins die, the whales die. We can eat tofu, but they can't. So that's where we're heading if we don't change our eating habits. And some people say, do you want everybody to go vegetarian? It's not really a matter of what I want. If we don't, we're going to lose this earth. So we've got to make some changes. This is not from my book. I just can't. This is going to be from the next book, and I just have to share it. What the book does do is go into this issue. And what we have here is a lovely statue of David. And we learn that after a 2-year visit to the United States, Michelangelo's statue of David is returning to Italy. His proud sponsors were KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, and Starbucks Frappuccinos. That's going in the next book, but I do talk about the health issues involved in, and I was, again, talking about this morning on Stu Leviton's show. I very much became vegan for the animal reasons. I liked my burgers, but I thought, I don't need them so much that I want to kill anybody to eat them. I can eat a veggie burger. But one of the sort of joys on the side is the way you feel and look and how helpful it is. And now we're finally learning how helpful it is for the planet as well. So. Okay, I'm about to read a very touching story about a turkey, so first we have to share the dark humor. I don't know why, but this is one of my favorites. It's Thanksgiving time at Sesame Street. And I don't know why I love that. But I'll just move that over so you don't have to look at that. Well, I read you about Olivia. All right. Here she is. This is called Thanking the Turkey Who Changed Thanksgiving. And this was an audio commentary that was read on Washington Post Radio on Thanksgiving Day. I always love to have this sort of stuff out there in the major media on Thanksgiving, just, make people, as they're taking a bite, they can get to hear the story. It's perfect. People in there, I think this was played at noon while everybody's in their kitchen just, putting the last bits on their turkey. At Thanksgiving, I remember Olivia. I met her in the year 2000 at Poplar Springs Farm Animal Sanctuary near Washington, D.C. Having fallen for Babe, the movie star, I thought I was there to meet the pigs. But Terry, the sanctuary owner, started our tour at the turkey coop. Terry opened the gate and introduced Olivia. Olivia had been living on a turkey factory farm till Hurricane Floyd wiped it out. Ironically, that hurricane saved Olivia from a particularly gruesome death. Turkeys are not covered under federal humane slaughter laws. Olivia hobbled through the gate. Hobbled because the ends of her toes had been cut off. That's standard practice on farms where jam-packed birds sometimes injure each other. For the same reason, the end of her beak had been seared off. That procedure is painful, since turkeys use their beaks to explore for food, so they are loaded with nerve endings. But Terry explained that it's cheaper to hack off the ends of toes and beaks than to give animals enough space. I was sitting cross-legged on the grassy hill near the coop. To my surprise, Olivia limped in my direction. She came close enough for me to reach out and touch her gingerly. She moved further in, and I could pet her. It was surprisingly like petting my dog. I reached my fingers under the outer feathers on her back and could feel a layer of soft down underneath. I'd only ever felt that down in luxury pillows. How odd and lovely to feel it warm on a living being. Within a couple of minutes, Olivia had edged herself into my lap. I continued to move my fingers through her down. She laid her head in the crook of my elbow. She fell asleep. I fell in love, and I adopted her. I couldn't take her home, but every year her photograph is in the middle of our Thanksgiving table, surrounded by a vegetarian feast. Olivia showed remarkable longevity for a modern turkey. Bred to be deformed with a grotesquely huge chest with lots of white meat. She'd been too weak to stand when she'd arrived at the sanctuary, but apparently a home with space to move, grass to enjoy, sunshine in which to bathe, and loving care had given her the will to live. And live she did, happily, until 2005, when we received the sad news that Sanctuary's lovely little turkey ambassador, my little ward, had died of cancer. We've since adopted other rescued turkeys and added more photos to our Thanksgiving table arrangement, but Olivia's will stay in the center. She changed our Thanksgivings forever, and nobody can ever take her place. I was telling people last night that, and that's a tiny little photo of Olivia there, my little honey bunny. And we did indeed, foster pig pay money at thanks yous for years and years. And this year we did it just a little bit different. And here I am in the Los Angeles Times. And this was on Thanksgiving Day too. So Washington Post, Thanksgiving, on the reading Thanksgiving Day. And this year LA got a huge big photo like this. And that's Bruce and Emily Turkey, named after Bruce Greenwood and Emily Deschanel, who helped me, she's from Bones, who helped me retire them. And I'm going to do that from now on. I recommend it. They are fun, cuddly little guys. I'm going to tell you, they were actually in the dining room for about 30 seconds for the shoot, then straight back out onto the patio in their coop and everything. Thank heavens I live in Los Angeles so we can do this, because they just crap everywhere. I mean, no wonder we've domesticated dogs. I mean, this ain't going to work. So, but they're sweet. When they're not crapping, they're lovely. And when you pet them, you can definitely pet them. But I didn't know this when Olivia crawled into my lap. I didn't know that I was in danger. I found it out with Emily one day. But when you pet them, you sort of have to sidle them up against you, and you rub them, but you have to make sure the back part's kind of not over your leg. Okay. Animals Anonymous, animal testing. Peter Singer, who wrote Animal Liberation, I got to know him through the movement, and I've written with him a fair bit. And I suppose some of you have met him. He is he's easygoing. He's always happy. I used to struggle horribly with depression. When you first get into the movement, you do. And then you sort of learn that it's not useful to go down with every story you read. But he's always in such good mood. And I asked him one day, aren't you ever depressed? And he said, oh, I was once. He said, when I was writing the chapter for Animal Liberation on animal testing, I really got depressed. And, whoa, I knew how he felt when I finished my Animals Anonymous chapter. It's rough stuff, but I am going to read you a couple of sections, one of them which is just so bizarre that it's more funny than rough, and then one of them which includes Gloria Steinem, because we're here at a room of one's own. So I wanted to... I've showed you Anthony Frieda's work. There's a wonderful Los Angeles artist named Linda Frost who gave me all of her work to use. And this is her work with the petri dishes with the eyes in them. And we've got another couple of pieces from her coming up. And let me get to... I talked about this on the radio this morning. In the Animals Anonymous section, I talk about animal testing. I talk about things that people don't know a whole lot about. When they hear animal advocates say that basically it doesn't work. What I did in the book was a lot of research, and you find scientific journals and which have really questioned the value of animal testing. So it's a good thing for people to know and to read, and to, when they hear the biomedical industry that makes billions of dollars off of this, telling us how absolutely vital it is. It's nice to see the other side and read what some of the journals have to say about it. And so I talk about that. I talk about the fact that every drug that comes out has to be tested on animals. But every drug that comes out, if you want to release a painkiller, what you have to prove is that that pill does what it says it will do. So obviously, to test pain, you have to put the animals in pain and before the people. So when you're bringing out a painkiller, for example, it has to do what it says it will do. It has to cure pain. It doesn't have to do it better than any other drug already out there. It doesn't have to do it as well as any other drug already out there. So again, animal testing to bring us these vital drugs that we all need. It's bringing us a lot of drugs that we definitely don't need as well. So I just want to plant the seeds, get people to know a little bit more about it, just so they start asking questions. So they don't, I mean, somebody called in this morning, how can you lump cosmetic testing in with medical testing? I don't. They're different. But the idea that, oh, medical testing is all about saving lives. No, a lot of it isn't. And I let people know that. And then we learn about government-funded research. And this is one of my favorites. This is a section in honor of the book and the movie that's just come out that I'm yet to see, called He's Just Not That Into You. But you is spelled E-W-E. He's just not that into you. The tennis great Martina Navratilova has come out against the Oregon State University and Oregon Health and Science University's research designed to change the preferences of homosexual animals. According to the researchers, about 8 to 10% of male sheep prefer same-sex partners. The Weekend Australian reported, researchers are trying to adjust the rate at which estrogen is absorbed into the brain to see if that will make the gay rams become attracted to ewes. The rams are killed at the end of the study so that their brains can be examined. Navratilovan's celebrity status has helped bring attention to the matter, a welcome change, as the shenanigans of university researchers rarely get public scrutiny. It's been fascinating to watch the performances of the gay ram researchers since their studies were outed by Navratilova, backed by PETA. The researchers publicly accused PETA of lying about the studies, particularly about any implications for humans. I've read the research protocol application, however, which states, quote, the primary goal of the proposed research is to understand the neuroanatomical and neurochemical basis of sexual preferences in male sheep. It notes that the research, and then quote again, has broader implications for understanding the development and control of sexual motivation and mate selection across mammalian species, including humans, unquote. A New York Times article on the controversy includes quotes from one of the researchers attempting to back away from that statement. The Times article says, mentioning human implications, he said, is, quote, in the nature of the way we write our grants, and talk to reporters. Scientists who do basic research find themselves in a bind, he said, adding, we've been forced to draw connections in a way that we can justify our research. So let's get that straight, so to speak. We shouldn't believe what the researchers wrote about human implications, because we should understand that they would write anything in order to get a research grant. But we should believe them now as they face public outcry about what they wrote. If there are no human implications, why are sheep being killed in experiments designed to change their sexuality? Surely this is not the vital life-saving research for which the biomedical community tells us we must, oh so regrettably, sacrifice animals' lives, while giving thanks for the great contribution they've made to human survival. The upside of the fiasco has been some of the publicity. The Weekend Australian article, for example, includes enlightening information for those inclined to view homosexuality as unnatural. It discusses homosexual acts that have been documented in kangaroos, emus, fish, foxes, seagulls, and whales. It even lets us know that among swans, so often held up as advertisements for lifelong monogamy, about 1 in 5 pairs are of the same sex. Navratilova has written to the university and implored, quote, for the sake of the animals who will die unnecessarily in these experiments, and for the many gays and lesbians who stand to be deeply offended by the social implications of these tests, I ask that you please end these studies at once. PETA comments, the trials can only be described as a needless slaughter of animals, an affront to human dignity, and a colossal waste of precious research funds, unquote. Ironically, PETA is often accused of being on the fringe, but their thinking on this one has to be mainstream. Surely a ban on same-sex animal marriage should be enough. And in honor of the scientist and what they had to say to the New York Times, oh, wait a second, there it is. We've got him reading physics, biology, engineering, chemistry, physiology, and creative writing. This one, as I said, I had to pull out my Gloria story today. She gave the book a beautiful endorsement and talked about the connection that Gandhi's peace was based on. He was vegetarian, and it's connected to peace, and that all movements are joined, and that she feels that I brought that out in the book, which was wonderful to hear. I'm going to read to you today a section called Femme Fatalities, in which she is quoted. And it starts with really painful periods. Undercover video taken in 2003 in the Columbia University Primate Lab, and this is available at femfatalities.com, shows a baboon bleeding from a wound in her head where a metal pipe has been inserted in order to observe the effects of stress on her menstrual cycle. Seriously. How many women who've had trouble with painful periods would be glad to know the researchers are doing that to try to help? And difficult pregnancies. Researchers have been conducting experiments to find out if high doses of vitamin C might counteract the negative effects of smoking during pregnancy. If so, pregnant mothers might be able to continue to kill themselves while safely preparing to bring new lives into the world. Indeed, the researchers argue that the studies are important because despite the wealth of evidence about the efforts of smoking on unborn children, they cannot persuade all of their pregnant patients to quit. So they make monkeys match the women's hurtful behavior and then kill and examine the monkey babies. Press articles reporting the findings included quotes from the researchers, but none from anybody who worried about the ethics of the study. No press reports questioned whether such experiments fall into the category of the unfortunate but absolutely necessary experiments on other species that many people think we must do for the sake of human health. And nobody asked whether women who cannot be persuaded to stop smoking while pregnant are ready to care for babies. In this country, every human primate has a right to have a baby and to poison that baby with nicotine if she so chooses. No non-human primate has the right to defend her baby from humans who wish to poison her with nicotine. The feminist icon Gloria Steinem has sent a letter to the director of the NIH's Office of Research on Women's Health, protesting the millions of federal dollars spent every year on experiments that are cruel to animals while, quote, taxpayers are cheated of an effective use of their dollars, unquote. She cites the nicotine experiments on pregnant animals and notes, quote from Gloria, at the same time, there's no money for many of the pregnant women desperately in need of the help of federal underfunded programs in ending their addictions. And we've got Bill Maher weighing in on this, and he says, I don't know anybody yet who's died from PMS. So for me, that's a particularly weak case to be making for the torturing of little creatures. I think most people would agree with that. And again, I don't tell people what to think, but I know a lot of people, when they really think about it, do they want baboons tortured to try and alleviate our PMS? The next chapter, this is Linda Frost's work again. She did the anonymous petri dishes, and the next chapter is called The Greenies. I talk about the common ground, and it's growing common ground, and they're finally starting to get it about what meat is doing to the environment. I mentioned in the book that a 2006 study reported by the United Nations cited the livestock industry as the #1 cause of greenhouse gases that cause global warming, more than all the transport industries put together. I mentioned that in the book. It had just sort of come out while I was finishing the book, but it was not being talked about even vaguely in any environmental circles. So many people saw Al Gore's movie, and he talks about all the things you can do to alleviate your environmental footprint, changing your light bulbs and whatever, and he doesn't mention meat. And thank heavens that is finally starting to change a couple of years later. And for example, the Sierra Club, the front page of their website at the moment has a wonderful article by a guy who says, you know, he's been eating meat, he loves it. The factory farming issue, the cruelty of the animals just wasn't enough to sway him, but he cares deeply about the future of the planet. And as much as he'd love to be eating meat, he's absolutely given it up, and he has a plant-based diet now. And he's like, and it's a no-brainer. It's just, what's the big deal? So that's on the front page of the Sierra Club website at the moment. And we've got, as usual, we've got the rock stars, Anthony Kiedis, and we've got a section, I don't know how many of you, I know a lot of people already involved in animal rights know about Paul Watson. Who's seen Whale Wars, the series on Animal Planet? 1, 2, 3, 4, a few people. Finally, Captain Paul started Greenpeace, and for ages, and he was too radical for them, and he got kicked out because he takes on the whalers. He goes chasing them in the high seas and makes it so they can't do their work, and they do things like bomb the whaling ships with stink bombs because the whales are cut off on the deck. So if you put stuff on the deck which is so absolutely horribly stinky and won't go away, that's the end of that venture for them. So that's the sort of things they do. But it's dangerous. Captain Paul got shot. And that's actually an amazing story. I wish he's spoken at some of my events, and I wish he was here to tell this. But he got shot in the chest when he was out on the high seas, and he was wearing his anti-whaling metal, what do you call it? And it hit that, and I mean, he still got hurt. He got horribly, horribly bruised, but the bullet went into his anti-whaling badge instead of into his lungs and heart. Absolutely amazing. So I do talk about Captain Paul's work, and then we've got Anthony Kiedis, and I'm just sharing this because this has to be my favorite endorsement of the book. It's Anthony Kiedis saying, "I'm sick of being ignorant. This book is education with a smile, information with a kiss from a dog who just drank out of a toilet, and should be required reading for all college students." So obviously he was inspired by that cartoon I showed you guys earlier. And the last chapter talks about compassion in action, and this is the chapter really written for people who've decided they want to make a difference, and it's all the different ways we can, whether it be getting involved in the government. This is Anthony Frieda's work again. I think you're probably getting the idea of why I so badly wanted him in the book. We got the Republicans and the Dems up there all mention the same stuff. If you can't see it at the back, there's dollar bills all over there, and that's where the donkey and the elephant are all grazing on. So, and I talk about, I've gone on a little bit of a journey. I wrote a chapter in Terrorists or Freedom Fighters. Yeah. In which I talk about the impact of the media on activism, but I'm very much on the fence in that chapter about how I feel about some of the direct action, particularly some of the more violent action. And I've changed over the years, and our movement has changed, and that is part of the issue too, that I feel this about some of the groups who are going to do absolutely anything to grab attention, and I used to say at least some of the violent stuff got the attention of the papers, and the worst thing that could happen to the animals is silence. Thank heavens things have changed, and here we are in a feminist bookstore, not some sort of animal rights bookstore, talking about animal issues. They've become part of the discussion, and we get beautiful stories on front pages without doing stupid stunts or hurting anybody or threatening to hurt anybody. So I talk about that, and I talk about that I think persuasion is the way to go more than threats. If you threaten people into being on your side, then the second you go away, they won't be on your side anymore. So we're really trying to change hearts and minds, and I talk about that. I talk about writing letters to the editor. Some of you saw this last night. If you've seen the book, you've seen Paula, my pit bull. There she is, smoking and drinking, just like her mom. And not anymore, not anymore. And she says, "I'm writing with regards to alcohol and nicotine tests on animals." And once you've read the book, you know she's not exaggerating. There's on dogs, nicotine tests on dogs still. And there's Paula, and I'm just showing her off now. She's on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. That photo was on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. But actually, I talk in the book about how it got there and how we can get the word out. And so there's a nice... I talked about this last night a lot in a speech I gave for the Vegan Teens dinner. That speech was really based on this section of the book, which talks about getting the word out, how you can get on the... I suppose that is a stupid stunt, but how you can get these issues out there in a warm and friendly manner. And I shared this, which is we're talking about getting nicer and softer. One woman saying to the other, "I've softened in my old age. I used to throw red paint on people wearing fur, and now I just spill red wine on people eating meat." And I'm going to go back because wait, there we go. I'm going to go back because I want to share that one at the very end. And I'm going to read you now just the very last section of the book. So it's the spoiler, if you want to close your ears. No, it's not an adventure tale. It's you'll still get something else out of it if you know the end. But okay, I'm talking about, as I mentioned, I wrote this book just to start getting the word out there. Animal rights isn't crazy. What we do to animals is crazy. This section is called Talk the Walk. This is for animal activists, and it's like, it's not all about how vegan you are, it's also about how you represent. One of the most important things we can do is to be willing to raise our voices and say that what's happening to the animals matters. The power of just one voice can have enormous impact. In one of her taped lectures, the spiritual teacher Marianne Williamson talks about an experiment done by NBC's Dateline. The show had an actor pretending to be hurt and crying out for help. Nearby, 2 other actors were just hanging out and talking. In a candid camera type of situation, Dateline watched the reaction of people walking by. Almost every person, as they saw 2 others ignore the cries for help, just kept walking. 1 person in 20 stopped and then called for more help. Here's the good part. Once 1 person stopped, every person who came into that situation afterwards also stopped and was willing to get involved. As Marianne explains it, once 1 person acts from an awakened heart, others will follow. When 1 is willing to speak the word, others will listen. But we must be willing to take a stand and speak it in a way that others will hear. The problem is not that we don't have enough love. The problem is that we're whispering our love. Or we are yelling it in such a tone that it does not sound like love at all. On that Dateline show, the 1 person in 20 was not whispering, nor was she attacking or insulting those who had not stopped. That wasn't necessary. To completely change the situation, all it took was for 1 person to call out and say, "Somebody needs help over here." Somebody does. The animals desperately need the help of those willing to call attention to their plight, to say that they matter, to speak the word. Don't whisper it. Speak it loud. Speak it with laughter and love so others will be willing to listen. You cannot be shy as you speak it. Your voice is crucial. You speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. So that's the last words of the book, and then I end with another Mutt's contribution, and that's this one. It's called Sweet Dreams. And there we see the lady putting her little cat to bed in a lovely, warm little cat bed and petting the cat on the head and saying sweet dreams. And we see the sow in her gestation crate, and she is having sweet dreams. She's dreaming of running around on fields. We see the elephant in the circus, and you see he's chained by, that's how they sleep in the circus, chained by 1 leg. And he's dreaming of being out running in the sunshine in the jungles or whatever. We see the caged hen who lives her whole life in a tiny little battery cage, and she's dreaming of, again, running around in the sunshine. We see the same for the little monkey stuck in the vivisection lab. He's in his cage, and he's dreaming. And we see the chained dog, whose name we don't remember, on the end of his chain outside, and he's dreaming that he's in exactly the same place as that little kitty cat who's being loved in this sweet dream. So I share that at the end because I think that's what we all dream, those of us who are working in this movement, that what we want to see, and we just have to keep putting the word out and hoping, we're not hoping, we know eventually it's going to sink in, and the idea is just to get people to think about these issues. That's it for the presentation. Thank you. And I hope some of you have questions and thoughts and whatever, and I'd love to take them.
Just switching over from
Yeah.
Regular meat-based diet.
Regular?
Well, sorry. From someone who, is, what kind of advice do you have for people who decide that they want to, go to a plant-based diet and to make it easy, or is it?
Yeah. There's veg starter kits, there's all sorts of things. Everybody's different. Some people just go what they call cold turkey. I didn't. And so all I can do is speak from my own perspective. I went vegetarian very gradually. I never made a commitment to be vegetarian. I just started eating healthier and healthier and noticed I ate less and less meat. And when I walked through the food aisles of the supermarket, I was very attracted by the fruit and veggie stand and not so attracted by, the other stuff, even though I had been eating it all my life. And I just ate it less and less often. Every time it's so often there's such an easy choice to make. You're out somewhere having more and more, and there on the menu, there's the beef burger, the turkey burger, and the veggie burger. How easy is that? Some people choose the turkey burger, and then they say to us, animal advocates, well, I don't eat white meat. And then I show them Olivia's story, and they realize maybe I've said the wrong thing to this woman. But sometimes it's just so easy to make the choices, and I'd say that's the way to start, is start making animal-friendly choices. When you go to a Chinese restaurant, why not get the tofu dishes? There they are. They're good for you. They're waiting to be eaten. And so for me, that worked, to just every day take a little meat off my menu. And I remember clearly the last time I had chicken was in 1982. I was in, some of you weren't born yet, and I was in Europe. And I remember I had grown up on chicken livers. And so I couldn't resist them. I hadn't eaten meat for ages, but I hadn't made a commitment that I wasn't going to. So I had the chicken livers. But then over the years, I think I went on and off fish. If I'd read Thanking the Monkey, I wouldn't have, because, I had this idea that just fish maybe didn't feel pain or weren't as smart, and then now we have no doubt that they do feel pain and they are as smart as other animals. There's sections in this where people talk about getting goldfish home and teaching them tricks within one day, and most dogs don't learn a trick that quickly. So, but I did it gradually. That worked for me. Just made the commitment in my mind. I guess I think that's the thing. If you decide you want to start to change, keep it in your mind. Change where you can. If you fall off the wagon, what really upsets me is when people say, "Oh, I was vegan for a while or vegetarian for a while, and it was just too hard." And so I say, "And now you eat meat how often?" "Oh, every day." And it's just, if it's just too hard, then when you feel like you need to eat meat, have a steak. And I was saying to Stu, I'd have a steak before I'd have a battery farmed omelet, because a steak is like, maybe I'd be eating 1/300th of the animal, and so that's things to think about. But I would say that if you fall off the wagon, if you cheat, that's not a reason to go back to eating meat every single day or 3 times a day. You just say, all right, I ate some meat, and then maybe you're eating meat once a week, and then maybe next thing you know, you're eating it once every 2 weeks. And that's what worked for me. I just sort of got the idea that I wanted to eat less of it, and I kept eating less and less, and before you knew it, I wasn't eating it anymore. So that's you're a quiet bunch.
If you could speak to this a little bit, though, one thing that is uncomfortable, I think, is that you make your own choices, and I feel really comfortable with that. But like when my kids come home on Thanksgiving, they're really disappointed if I don't make a turkey breast, something that goes along. And when you go out to dinner and you try to discreetly just not order things and ask a few questions, all of a sudden there's a focus on that, and somehow it's misinterpreted as a judgment towards other people, and I know you spoke about that in the book a little bit in terms of, and in the article that they wrote in the Isthmus about how you do that in a gentle way.
That's the most important thing, is you have to just make it so clear that it is not a judgment, and the problem is we're human. It usually is. I mean, it's hard for it not to be.
Right.
So I think what we have to do is get out of that judgment mode. And I talked about this a little bit last night, and I don't want to bore the people who were there last night. And I don't talk about it too much in this book. I'm going to talk about it in my next book. But something that really shifted for me was when I started to be, aware of my own shortcomings. Until then, I'd kind of been pretty sure I was perfect. And I remember going out to dinner with a group of women, and they were people who worked hard on the puppy mill issues and the pet store issues. And that was their thing, and they were really adamant about it. And they were so angry and so judgmental about anybody who would ever buy a... sorry. Aren't you all glad it's not any of you? Okay, I'm disturbing myself. They were so judgmental about these people who would buy a pet, or they would buy a dog, and they shouldn't, and I know they know better, and la 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 la. And meanwhile, one of them is eating tuna, and one of them is having cheese on our pasta. Now, the gal having cheese on her pasta has been in our movement for ages, and I know she knows what happens to dairy cows, and she knows about their calves being taken away to the veal crates. I mean, she knows that, you know, if you're going to have dairy, and I don't say this is judgment, but when you learn a lot about it, you realize it's not really different. Not all. It's the same industry as veal. She knows this. She's eating it anyway, and she's on those people buying dogs from puppy mills. So as I said last night, so there I was judging her judgments because I was sitting in judgment of her eating her cheese. Well, you know. Then I started to think about my own life, and I'm not bad on animal issues. I do better than most people do. But Peter Singer, who I mentioned, who I had written with, and he's very well known for having written Animal Liberation, he's also written a lot on poverty. And he had this wonderful piece in New York Times Magazine many years ago, which really moved me when I read it recently, where it talks about a man who is driving along in his $300,000 Lamborghini, and he sees a 3-year-old girl on the train tracks ahead of him. And he realizes that if he swerves to miss her, he is going to smash his car. Whereas if he drives right over her, he might get a bit of a dent, but it would be incomparable damage. What should he do? What would you do? And of course the immediate response is, how can you even ask that? And then Peter says, well, what about the 3-year-old starving in Sudan? You know she's there on the train tracks or starving in Sudan, and you know that if you sent her $20 a month, that she wouldn't die. But you've decided that you like your bottle of wine better. That costs the same amount. That had a huge, when I really thought about that, that had a huge impact on me. And as I was trying to, you know, I'm happy to be talking about this because I'm looking for the right words to say how it affected me. Because it's not useful if it's, I'm bad, I'm horrible, I'll kill myself now, you know. The thing is that we're all human, and none of us are doing everything that we could be doing. And none of us ever will. So those of us who are extremely aware and tuned in to what is happening to the animals, we can do our best to spread that word, to make other people more sensitive to it. The first step is your kids not thinking you're crazy before they start eating the way you do. But in order to, if we sit in judgment of them, we won't be able to get them on our side. And for me, the way to stop sitting in judgment is to first take a look at myself, and not to sit in judgment on myself, but say, you know, gosh, I'm a human, and this is what we do. We do some things well, we do some things not so well, we try and get better all the time. And so that's sort of a roundabout. I don't know if that helps at all, but if we think that way, that all of us came from a place where we weren't doing our best, now we're trying to do better, there's some things that we're not even trying to better on, and maybe we should be, it can help take away the air of judgment, which alienates people. And then they'll end it when you say, I'm not going to cook turkey because it's too upsetting to me, but have your turkey before you come, or whatever. They'll feel differently about it when you're coming from a place of it being about you and your feelings. And they're your kids. They're going to be interested when they don't feel that they're being judged by you. So that's sort of what I found. And I find a lot of my friends go vegan eventually, and they never used to, and I think it's because my attitude has changed. They sort of hang around and they say, she's not a judger, and God, she's healthy, and maybe she's right about some of the stuff. So I don't know if that helps at all. Yes.
As our money rushes around with fast profit, our agriculture and food seems to rush about the globe for fast profit. What do you think of having granola bars shipped via freighter from New Zealand and Australia to be marketed here in the U.S. because we can save a penny a granola bar? Do you find that possibly local agriculture should supersede global agriculture?
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose that's not sort of a topic that's right here and now, but I can certainly tell you I'm a local farmer's market shopper, and and you know what, I say it's not a topic right here now, but it's all connected, because when we use up too much fuel, when we cause global warming, we're killing animals. It's something, you know, I talk in the chapter of the Greenies about how we wish the environmentalists were more sensitive to our issues, and sometimes they hunt and we wish they wouldn't. And then I sort of think, well, how sensitive are animal advocates to the environmental issues? And that, you know, if we're only somewhat worried about the Arctic drilling, you know, I remember this in particular because Ingrid Newkirk made a comment on this which really knocked me out when I heard her speak. But it was the time when all the environmentalists were worried about Arctic drilling, and some animal advocates, you know, were worried about it, but a lot of people, well, that's not really our issue. And, you know, the public response, the people who wanted to drill, said, well, the land's uninhabited.
Yeah.
And Ingrid said, well, no, that land is inhabited by millions and millions and millions of families. They're just not human families. So to answer your question, whenever we do something like that and we do things that destroy the earth and use up resources, when we hurt the earth, those of us who are animal advocates, we are killing countless animals. We're losing, I can't even remember how many species a day we're losing at the moment. So yes, buy local for the animals' sake.
Is it always so black and white? I mean, I'm from Texas. They would tar and feather me if I didn't eat meat. Are there organizations or companies that humanely process beef?
Do what?
That humanely process meat?
Uh-huh. Well, first things first. You're from Texas. They'd tar and feather you if you didn't eat meat. Are you sure about that? I actually, for 9 years, I dated somebody. He's a Texas oil man. And when we met, he wasn't vegetarian, vegan, nothing. And I remember on our lunch date, when I told him I was vegetarian when I was ordering, I just expected him to roll his eyes and that'd be the end of the date. But his reaction was actually, oh, we just had Oprah. He's from Amarillo, now Dallas. We just had Oprah in Amarillo. That was just so cool. She's cool. And we're like, what? Okay. So we talked a bit, and then, you know, we started dating, and as a typical Texas man, he was a real gentleman. So he didn't want to eat anything that would offend me, so he started eating vegetarian dishes, just, you know, and we started eating more and more meals together. And after a few weeks, he thought, God, I feel good. And he, you know, eventually went vegan. And he's on the board of the Dallas Opera, and he, they invited him to come and do their thing, and of course they wanted money out of him. And he said, well, you know, my dad used to always go to the opera and he'd be giving you money, but he had heart disease and there was just nothing he could eat. Would you consider, it's amazing the little things you can do that can make this huge difference, would you consider putting a vegan option on your menu this year? And naturally, if money speaks, there's a vegan option on this menu. But one of the most adorable, I remember it was very early days, and I remember he was looking for a wallet, and he went into Neiman Marcus, of course, Texas, Dallas, Neiman Marcus, expensive. And, you know, it's getting a little bit easier, and you can do it on the internet. You can buy some great vegan wallets at Nat and Nash, and you go men can go to the Discerning Brute website and get Joshua Catch's tips. This was 9 or 10 years ago. It wasn't so easy. So Jim walks into Neiman Marcus, and he's looking at the wallets, and he sees one that doesn't look, they're all leather, and he looks at that one and says, what about that one? And the guy says, oh, that one's ostrich. which Jim says, oh, that's not very nice. and he wasn't, you know, when it's just, and he is a Texas oil man, and he kind of reeks of it. And you'd be surprised that people aren't as mortified as they used to be. So anyway, so you can be yourself. As far as humanely raised beef goes, humanely raised beef. Something I make very clear in this book, there are people in our movement who it's black or white, and you've got to be vegan, and if you're not vegan, you're bad. And I think that sends the message out that if you're not vegan, you might as well be eating 3 bacon double cheeseburgers a day. Not true. And there are people who, you know, turn towards humane meat on their way out. So something I make very clear is I absolutely support welfare campaigns. I think that people who are vegan, who are doing everything they can to make the world go vegan, absolutely need to be also working on campaigns which alleviate the suffering of animals, which get the South out of the vegetation craze. And my thinking on that is that if it was us, when vegan activists go to jail, we do our best to get them vegan meals to make their stays more comfortable. So if we don't do that for the animals who are supposedly we're representing, then what we're really doing is making them objects in service to our abolitionist ideology. If we do it for people, if we do it, why wouldn't we do it for the animals? So I do support welfare campaigns. Some people take that to mean, therefore, that I support welfare meat, and I think that's, yes, some of the animals are treated better than others. All of them end up in a slaughterhouse, and I go into, the stunning and all that. What a lot of people don't know is that a slaughterhouse will pass. A lot of them don't pass their tests and get rated well. But if 95% of the animals go through and get stunned on the first stunning, then the slaughterhouse passes, which means that 1 in 20 animals can go down the beginning of that belt completely conscious and alive and start being processed. And that slaughterhouse is considered to be doing its job properly. And when you think of that, it's like humanely raised meat, and then they have one bad day. I mean, that day is a lot worse than any of us are ever going to have, we hope. So I personally think about that, and it's why, I'm like, no, it's not something I would do. But is it better than supporting that animal having every single day to be a living hell? Of course. But I would certainly, from my perspective, I suppose, if I was trying to bring as little cruelty into the world as possible, I'd probably, rather than change to humane meat, I'd probably think about if I'm not going to go vegan or whatever, I just consider eating less meat. Nobody in Texas is going to make you. You might want to not announce that you're vegetarian, but according to Talk the Walk, I hope you would, in a warm, friendly way. But nobody's going to insist that you eat it every single meal. So I would say, before I'd think about, trying to swap to a humanely raised diet, you're so much healthier if you eat less of it anyway. The world's better, the animals are better. Sorry?
Is there a list or a place that you can spend your money and support this and still buy meat?
Support.
I mean, is Kentucky Fried Chicken worse than chicken flick or whatever it's called?
Kentucky Fried Chicken in Canada just brought out unchicken nuggets, and apparently they're delicious. So you can get photos of yourself walking into Kentucky Fried Chicken for your Texas friends, and they won't have to know that you're buying the nuggets, which are good for the animals and good for yourself. I don't think I've answered your question because I don't know if I understood it.
My question is you're talking about the vegan is completely black and white. I mean, you go vegetarian, you're not hurting any animals, you're just eating vegetables, that's fine. But
of course, and that's
is
the
there
black
some
and
way
white.
in between that we can gradually get to that point? I mean, is there someone like me who's not willing to give up meat per se?
Yeah.
Is there some place that I can spend the money that would go to better causes to go to more?
Oh God, yes, absolutely,
and is there a list of
Okay,
those
now I've got
places
it. Okay.
That we boycott these guys because they just cage everything.
Gotcha.
And we farm raise over here, whatever
Yes,
this.
absolutely. I got you. I got you. So if I'm you, and I'm saying I'm absolutely never going to give up meat, but I do care about these issues. I might keep eating meat and give some money to Farm Sanctuary, who do everything they can to make sure that the animals are treated better. I might go to, and I'm trying to remember the names of them, and we can email about this later, but there are actually companies who refuse to buy meat that hasn't met certain standards. So you can definitely change where you shop, and you can start giving money to causes. And the amount of meat you eat, if you're giving a sizable amount of money to Farm Sanctuary and you're still eating meat, you're probably doing a lot more good overall for the animals, because Farm Sanctuary is also working on making people vegan. So if your money is making 100 people vegan and you're still eating meat, some people would say, well, how hypocritical, and I'd say, go for it. I mean, that's 99 versus 1. So yes, there are things you can do, even if you're attached to your meat. The problem is, of course, if you're giving money to Farm Sanctuary, you're going to be receiving their brochures in the mail, and you're going to be seeing some photos, so you might lose your appetite for it. And just again, I'm not saying you have to say, I'm giving up meat tomorrow, but when there's so many times when it's so easy to make the choice, every time you pick up your fork, you can make the choice. At this moment, am I going to have the beef burger, or am I going to try that black bean burger on the menu right next to it? And you don't have to say, I'm going vegan. Just, you can make some choices and see how some of this stuff tastes, and just be a little bit more open to it. And one thing, people always say, what's the one thing I can do? And the easiest answer is, next time you're at Starbucks, just order the soy latte. Tastes good. It's good for the animals. It's good for the environment. I go into what the dairy industry does to the kids living in Fresno. And how easy is it to say soy latte instead of skim latte? So that's the sort of thing, and you can make a huge difference just by making some changes.